Wow, welcome to the Stigma Podcast, Heidi. How does it feel? Is this what you expected?
Like I said, walking in, I'm honored to sit my ass in the same place so many great asses have sat. Dude, you've done so much cool shit with this, Laisha. It's really amazing to see the different people you've had on here and their different stories and journeys, and to be one of the people sitting here now. Oh, yeah, dude, it's an honor. Thank you.
Of course. No, that means the world.
Taking it with me.
Take it with you.
Yeah.
This microphone is a part of you.
This is me, so I get to take it with me.
No, but really, I appreciate that. And I feel like this has somewhat been long overdue. We've done a lot of work together with Fuck the Stigma and Stairways, doing a lot of outreaches together. And a lot of it hits home for you. Mm-hmm. So I kind of wanted, this question just coming to mind, like, what are you really passionate about?
So, like you said, the outreach.
Yeah.
I love the outreach. I love getting out there on the street and meeting people really when they're in like the raw and the thick of it. And what can we do in that moment where it's probably for some like the darkest space of maybe little to no hope or despair, or like one of the worst states you can imagine yourself in, the homeless outreach, and the women on the street, the women who are on drugs, pregnant with kids, like getting out there really when it's that kind of pivotal spot where people need the help, right? Working in like the treatment industry, there's the insurance aspect and people get to come in, and yes, I'm not diminishing like the difficulty of coming in to make that choice to do your detox and your follow-up care and the work that it takes, but there's something to be said about being out there without that hope and then having somebody come in and maybe give some hope. And like, that was my story.
Yeah.
You know, so maybe this is all fucking ego driven because like it happened to me, but that's why.
It's like, that's where you were.
Yeah.
It hits a spot in your heart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think it's very important for people that were in a similar situation that you were in, that you help those, because it's almost like I can't comprehend it sometimes. I haven't been through the experiences of being homeless or amongst other things. So I think it's really different when you relate so much to the person who's helping you's story.
Yeah, I think so too. When I was out there, when I was the one needing the help and homeless and hopeless and insuranceless and a list of warrants out for me and really wanting to get help, and it was nowhere to be found, the person who ended up helping me, he was a nurse essentially doing like a homeless outreach to help me.
Yeah.
And I was so skeptical of this dude. Like, and are you an addict? Well, no, I'm not. But, you know, my heart goes out and I want to help these people. So why? Again, like, why do you care? Like, what are the motives here? Like, what is this really about?
What are you getting out of this?
It took some time to build any kind of rapport of trust because, one, I already didn't trust people. Two, again, why the fuck would somebody who had never been in the place I'd been in want to help? Well, turns out there's all kinds of people who care and want to do things for people. But I do think it helps a little bit just build the rapport and the understanding. Holy shit, you've been where I am. That's okay. There's already that.
Yeah, there's almost that instant connection.
Yeah.
For sure. Like, for example, in meetings, the first thing they want to do they want you to do when you share is identify. Like, how do you qualify for being here? Yeah. And it's so people can connect. Like, oh, I went through the same thing. Oh, I went through something very similar. Yeah. It's something different with going through similar experiences. It's a level of trust is automatically there, which is interesting, but it helps. Yeah. But it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to be there.
Right. But lucky us too, to be in like such a wide and diverse community that there's somebody for everything and every type of person and background and experience and situation, that there is somebody to connect with somebody, no matter what. Like, I've yet to see a situation so far out, so dark, so hopeless, so twisted, so whatever, that there's not somebody else that they can relate to in the specifics. Maybe not one person that hits every mark of every specific, but to find the people that do. And that's what I encourage people, like, find somebody in all these aspects that you can relate to going forward, because you're going to build that bridge and see, you know.
But then it takes that courage to even talk to somebody else about that. Again, that ties in with the stigma of, I don't want to own that like that. It's almost like a denial of my experience with whatever it was.
Yeah.
So it's like there's healing and acceptance that has to come in before you can even have that open and honest conversation with somebody else.
Which is how we get through these stigmas, you know? Hey, right?
The conversation, for sure.
Yeah.
So you were in that homeless situation. And then a nurse helped you, but how did it start? Like, how did you get there to that point? And how long? I just want to know.
How I got to the point of being homeless? You know, I'd been hooked on drugs I used for about 18 years. About 18 years before I got clean. I got clean when I was 32, so a bigger chunk of my life than not.
Yeah.
And as with any type of drug use, it was progressive. My first pickup did not put me out on the street, right? But as life continued to move forward and as my use was progressive and the necessity to stay high was there, and then the ways and means in which I needed to get more continued to happen, you know, from casual use to partying to absolute necessity to my entire life and scope of being. So over the years, I managed, and my of choices, as if it really matters around here, but were heroin and meth, and pretty quickly also the IV use, right?
So progressed to IV use.
It progressed to IV use, and then I would say I was just as addicted to the needle as I was the actual substances. Like the obsession with the ritual and the ways. I mean, man, there'd be times where I'd have the drugs in front of me, but I still needed to wait to get the needle, and I could have easily not been sick by using another route to get it in me, smoke, snort, whatever, right? But like I needed that third piece with it. So I remember this kind of crossroads moment in my life where I was really just trying to balance a foot in both worlds of trying to, you know, manage having a job and interact with my family and somewhat keep up appearances, and then the rest of me that was just so deep in this addiction, and one day going, fuck, I can't do both. So what am I going to do? I'm going to be the best damn drug addict there is, because I can't do both, and it's got to be one or the other.
I can't balance a family life and my addiction.
Yeah, or work, or trying to pretend that I was something that I wasn't. And so at that point, you know, fuck the job, fuck, I hate saying this, but like really fuck trying to keep up with my family. Like I couldn't keep lying to them and lying to them and lying to them. And I was living with a boyfriend at the time, we'll call him that for, you know, simplicity's sake, who was supplying the finances for everything, paying for the roof over the house, the drugs, clothes, whatever. And when he went away to prison, very shortly thereafter, I was homeless because...
Yeah, he was your support.
Entirely. You know, I got dragged out of that apartment by two sheriffs with their guns pointed at me and the red little...
The
lasers on me. And I went into my car, and I lived in my car until my car shit out, because clearly I couldn't support, you know, keeping up with a car. And then I was on the street, and it happened so quickly in that span of time. So you had asked how it got to the point of the nurse with the homeless outreach.
And overall, what was the kind of struggles you faced during the homelessness? I imagine it's a lot.
Yeah.
Any like negative backlash from people, or how did you feel about yourself and your situation? Were you in acceptance of it, of like, yeah, this is cool,
I never thought it was cool. No, like I never thought it was cool, but it was where I was at and what I needed to do. You know, I think a lot of things were attempted to bring some sort of like normalcy or comfort to the situation, right? Mm-hmm. Like you call some people to see if you can couch surf first, right? You hang out with people who, you know, they have motel rooms paid for 2 weeks. So, okay, I'll do this. You let me stay here. I'll help with this. You help with that. And so
a lot of transactions.
Literally everything was transactional. Everything was transactional. There was, up until that nurse met up with me, there was no just like sincere offering of hope or help. I take that back, actually. Whenever I went to the needle exchange, that was one of the only places that I would go to where I felt like a sincere compassion and not wanting anything from me. Whenever I would go to the needle exchange, like that was the only time and place where there was just compassion, no transaction.
I dig it. So that's harm reduction, needle exchanges, right?
Uh-huh.
So that's harm reduction surrounding like addiction. Mm-hmm. A lot of us view it as like, oh, just Narcan or something, but it goes deeper into like fentanyl test strips and then the education, then also needle exchanges. I feel like it's a pyramid. Most people are cool with the Narcan and the naloxone, but when it comes to needle exchanges, they're like, no.
Why would we provide clean needles to people that's just gonna want them to use more? It's just, or what if someone was never using a needle and then they go to a needle exchange and they get hooked on it? Fuck that, man. Like, it doesn't work like that. The first time I heard of a needle exchange, I thought it was a setup by the cops. Like, you're going to get a bunch of junkies in the same place? There's no way. And I had to scout it out before I'd show up. Like, no one's going to just show up there who doesn't actually need it. And then the people who do, let me tell you how many times I've slept through making it there when I really needed to. Like, even to get there takes some amount of effort to make happen.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, even, I don't know where exactly I lie with it. Because if I think about it, harm reduction is harm reduction. A lot of diseases are spread through shared needles. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, with needle exchanges, yes, we could be promoting, you know, less spreading of disease and people not dying that way. But then it's also the thing of people are going to be using needles regardless. Have them do it in a safe way. There is a situation where somebody does go to that and they get hooked on needles. There's a lot of different things. A lot of people think Narcan, it's just like, oh, if they think they're going to be good if they overdose because there's naloxone. You can make all these different arguments and such, but what harm reduction is trying to do is have people be safe.
Allow people to live long enough to perhaps find recovery.
Yeah.
Yeah. I heard once, people are having Narcan parties where they get so high they intentionally overdose and then somebody Narcans them so they can do it again.
What?
And I'm like, fucking nobody's doing that because one, like, nobody wants to be like Narcan. Like, it doesn't feel good. You're not going to perpetually like get yourself in a state, I'm going to get so high, I'm going to overdose and like have my friend Narcan
put me in a withdrawal.
It's going to be so good.
You go into immediate withdrawal.
Like, I think there's a lot of fear mongering around it of what people might do. But I think really at the end of the day, so much of it is just about survival. You know, it's just about basic existence because think about it, when you are in that state, you're just basically trying to exist. There's not a lot of forward growth when you're that deep in addiction or your usage and need and necessity. And then when it comes to the needle exchange, and then also the Narcan. And
then also look at it, that's the only place you felt love and compassion while you were homeless.
Mm-hmm.
It's because they wanted you to be okay.
Seriously.
You know, it's that aspect as well that means a lot.
Yeah.
Even when you're passing out naloxone, that care that we're bringing to them, like, hey, we give a fuck about you, don't forget that, can like keep them holding on and maybe seek recovery or maybe reach out to one of them like, hey, how can I get help? You know?
Yeah.
For whenever they're ready.
When I'm out doing it, I try to make it a point to not just like, okay, here you go, but like I try and consciously have some conversation in it, look people in their eyes and just like be present with the person. even if not for a long time, but do that because anyone could hand out a Narcan, or I could get my needles from Walgreens and still be kind of shifty-eyed because I'm too shameful to, look them in the eye about it. But to just be present and accepted for, this is where you're at and this is what's going on, but I meet you as a human meeting another human in this moment, and it's okay, you're valid. That's what I try and do with it, because that was where I felt that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you also mentioned the addiction to the needle itself.
Oh, yeah.
Like, what is that like?
So the ritual that I had of just utilizing the needle, like trying to hit with the needle, trying to find the veins, like the whole process of it was an addictive action to me. It was the specific route that I chose that I was obsessed with. And so there were times when maybe I didn't even need to get high, but I'd still be using it empty, just like trying to find a vein. The obsession with looking at vein maps, the pictures, like I kept it as the background on my cell phone, so I could always be looking at it to try and see where my veins were and could be on myself. It was a whole action obsession for me along the way, which ultimately became evident, It became evident in like my physical health and my physical appearance too because of that. And it's so funny, man. I was remembering this just last night. So I was used by myself. The first time I used a needle, I was shot up by somebody, and then never again after that. I always did it on my own. And there was a situation sometime a couple of years into me doing it where I was actually around some other people, and I remember them being in the room going, oh man, like my veins are really blown out. I've got bad track marks. And I looked at them and I said, what are you talking about? Like, you look fine. Like, what about this? And I pulled up my sleeve, and the moment that 2 other IV users were shocked and stunned by the way that my arm looked was the first time that I realized, oh, there's something not right here. Like, if I'm fucking these guys up, I'm really doing something wrong. I mean, it's not like I had someone teach me or show me along the way or describe that what I was doing wasn't right. So when these 2 guys said, oh no, dude, you're fucked up, that's when kind of the light went on for me that I'd really gone deep in the actual physical aspect of harming myself with the needle.
If I may, you also mentioned before we kind of started talking about self-harm. Mm-hmm. Do you think that I'm getting a vibe and a sense that it's correlated?
It must be.
Yeah.
I think, okay, back up. Yeah. When I was a teenager, I cut myself. Arms, legs, lips, and really stopped that action, I'm going to say probably 17 years old. And with self-harm, cutting yourself in that action, it's kind of that release, the fixation on the physical manifestation of what you're feeling. And I guarantee you, with what I was doing with the needle and the way I'd pick and poke and stab and like really harm myself, I guarantee there was a lot of similar action of just that fixation in also still try not to feel what I was feeling, focus on something external versus internal. Yeah, I bet there.
And that sense of control and all the endorphins released when
you make happen what you want to make happen finally.
Yeah, that sense of control. So through that process, you ended up developing a lot of scars.
Girl, yes. Yeah.
And then you said you went on another podcast, like a tattoo podcast, too. You got one covered up, like one of your arms covered up. Tell me a little bit about that.
So we've got the not covered up arm. Camera, I don't know if you can see any of these things. We've got the covered up arm. So you can see I've got the divots up here. Every line was the tracks that I was trying to track down the veins. And then all the circular scars were from the abscesses that I got along the way. So tops of my arms, some on my legs. This arm was a little bit worse condition, so that's why we did the cover up on this arm, which you can even see on the tops here. So there was a great deal of physical damage that I did to myself. Yeah, it started with trying just to track and actually find the veins, but with the unhealthy lifestyle I was living, repeated needle use because there wasn't always access to clean needles. I was not a clean person myself, and probably just even the drugs I was putting into my system too, and whatever was mixed in to those, powders and Coca-Cola and coffee and whatever gets mixed into it.
Yeah.
I'd MRSA like all the time. I always had abscesses. There wasn't a time in a 3 or 4 year span where I didn't consistently have abscesses. I probably owe a great amends to like 99-cent store and Dollar Tree for the amount of Band-Aids, hydrogen peroxide, gauze wraps, shit that I've stolen just to like keep some sort of wound health. Yeah. But like, it was really fucking gross, Laisha. Like it looked bad. It smelled bad. It felt bad. Summer times in Southern California, long sleeves and wraps and like the ways I try and get creative with things. Like it was an entire part of my identity for years. So again, not just being someone who's using, who's trying to hide that, but the actual physical manifestation and the upkeep and the worry and the hospital visits and the sicknesses and the stealing, like it was all so ingrained with my usage too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you said you got one of your arms covered up.
Mm-hmm.
And we also talked about how we kind of don't like talking about the scars. And do you feel like do you currently feel any shame with them?
So no, like today, in my body and my skin, I don't. But the shame and the stigma attached to not only drug use, but seeing people who are wounded or scarred was huge. In the act of use, my shame was out the fucking roof, And when I first got clean, there was still a lot to that, very discretionary as to when I would wear short sleeves, still even as they were healing initially. The first job that I had in recovery, when I worked at a little restaurant, I always wore long sleeves because, these are people who are not in recovery. Like, are they going to ask questions? No, people don't really ask questions about scars. So they're just going to wonder. They're going to paint a picture of it themselves. Or if they do ask, how the fuck do I answer them honestly? Oh yeah, So it took some time with that. And it was the day before I got 6 months that I even told my parents about it. They'd never seen my arms in the time I was using because, like I said, I fucked off involvement with my family. And then as I got clean and I started to reintegrate and the healing began, it was still some time into my recovery before I could even bring it up to them.
Interesting.
We were going to Texas for my brother's Air Force graduation, and I was so nervous leading up to it because I thought, dude, it's gonna be summertime in Texas, like they're gonna see it, so how do I approach this without trying to avoid it the whole time? And no, I don't want to be in avoidance anymore. I want to be able to be comfortable in my skin and share this with other people. And so I had the conversation with my parents the night before my 6 months. And I said, look, I need to talk to you guys. I don't want this to be something we either pretend you don't see. I don't want to spring it on you, but I need to tell you guys about my scars and my track marks. And, I showed them my arms and I explained, and they asked some questions. My parents aren't addicts. And again, I hadn't seen them while I was using. They didn't see it. And then in my first handful of months clean, when I did see them, I still made sure I wore long sleeves. I wasn't ready for that conversation. So when we finally did, it was a beautiful moment. And, my mom cried, but she like kissed my arms. And it was my first kind of like, okay, like okay, you know, these are about healing now. These are not about what was, like, this is about what's going forward here. Yeah.
I envisioned the whole thing, everything you were saying. I was just getting a visual in my head, and yeah, that's beautiful. It really is. But a lot of people, sometimes, like, I don't know how to go about talking about scars with people, because overall I am an avoidant person. I have friends, very close friend of mine, like, she has self-harm scars. And it's just like, yeah, I notice it, but I'm not gonna be like, whoa, you know, like, or I don't really feel like starting a conversation with it, maybe because I don't know if they don't want to, or because it is what I view it as it is what it is, and she's healing. But it's almost like I'm ready to talk about it whenever you are. I kind of wait for people to bring it up. I usually don't go out of my way to be like, so what's that?
Sure.
I think it's out of respect and to not make people feel uncomfortable. You know what I mean? So it's like, what is the proper way to go about it? Because again, like, I really stand on having an open and honest conversation about the hard and uncomfortable stuff.
Yeah.
But then I also don't want to make you uncomfortable if you're not ready for it. You know?
Well, you're very considerate in that respect. You know, like, that's very kind of you. But I do think that is a commonly taken stance with things. When you see someone that's scarred, whether it be self-harm, track marks, maybe from a terrible injury or wound or whatever, it's not typically the thing that people just go, whoa, okay, what's that?
There'll be one out of a few that make a comment.
Happened to me at that first job I worked at. I was wearing sleeves that were about quarter length, right? And this drunk guy pulls me by my arm, lifts up my sleeve, and he's like, hey, what are these from? That was my fucking face. I was so shocked and I was so angry. One, don't fucking touch me. Two, kind of, how dare you? You know? It wasn't as if I was wearing the tank top with just my arms out. He had somehow seen something here and then decided to aggressively approach the situation. You know, I was so fucking thrown off by that. But on the other side of things too, most people who aren't familiar with like track marks or usage scars, they've told me, like, they've made assumptions or this, that, whatever. But the handful of people who've come up to me because they know what it's from, they have some to some certain degree, and to them, like, they could identify and it brought some sort of comfort. That's another place where my healing started in recovery. There was this girl outside of a meeting who was so ashamed of her scars. And, like, bless her heart, like, they were minimal, but to her, they were so evident and they were representative of what she had done and where she'd been. And she had such shame behind them. And someone said, hey, I want you to meet my friend, you know? And they brought her on over to me and they're like, Heidi, lift up your sleeve, show her your arm. And I was like, okay, because I kind of knew where the conversation was going. And the therapeutic value right then and there to be able to go, okay, we can reduce the shame here. Because I had the conversation, yeah, when they were open and active, I was ashamed of that. These are healed, man. Like, these are going forward. Like, this is what we're doing now. We're standing out front of a meeting, like, talking with each other, bringing healing, like, doing better for our life. Like, that's where we're at now. And the power that it had to bring that sort of comfort was, dude, it was special. And it's happened handfuls of times along the way.
And that goes right back to what we were saying in the beginning of this episode with the power of shared experience and how comforting it is to know that you're not alone in a situation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, do you intend on tattooing or covering up your other arm?
It's been such a back and forth debate in my head. So the reason why I ended up getting this one tattooed, because off the bat in recovery, I went, dude, I'm never gonna, I'm living out loud and I'm not ashamed. And like, it's going to be you. Like, I'm finally not ashamed of myself, because again, years of shame, years of covering up, years of intentional burying things and hiding and secrecy and this and that. And when I got clean, I went, no fucking way. But then I had my daughter, right? And so now I've got my kid, and I was thinking one night, gosh, well, like, what if it's not about me? You know, what if she grows up, and this is my mind running now as a mom, like, what if she grows up and like some kids' parents judge her because they make a call on me? And so I started thinking about it less of like how I feel about it, but like, how would this impact my daughter growing up? Or she's young, she's 2.5 years old. I don't know if this is a me fear or whatever, but what about when she starts asking the questions about it, you know? And again, maybe that's a me fear or not, but when my friend offered to tattoo it, it was in service towards my daughter. Now we've gotten one, we haven't done the other, and I'm at this kind of place in between where I really don't know yet. And even if they both are, like, I've still got plenty, you know, but maybe not as
they're not
out loud as the other ones are. So I'm on that path of trying to figure out of what's next with it, because whether I do or whether I don't, my story and my journey and my experience remains the same. The visual impact can be like that shocking, jarring, immediate notice to the situation, but maybe I don't need to take that stance later on in life. Maybe I do. I don't know yet. I'm not there with it. So we'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see both sides of the coin. I really do.
Yeah.
Because you could look at it as, I think your daughter will one day hear about your past.
For sure.
Yeah. So she'll know one way or another. It could be from your scars, her asking as a kid, or she grows up and you tell her stories or something. And then it could be her treated differently because somebody sees you, but then the power of owning your scar and helping somebody else. You know, I can see why you would either cover it up or keep it. And at the end of the day, I'm happy with whatever you choose.
Thank you.
And it's going to be a process, and you don't have to come to that decision anytime soon.
Nope. So it is funny kind of being like half in and half out here, you know? It's
cool though.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
And there's people that would rep their self-harm scars. Some people cover them up. It could be like, yeah, you can, it's either because they don't want to obviously be stigmatized for having them or treated differently, look differently, or because they want to, there's a story there, and there's a healing process there with those scars that can help somebody else.
Absolutely. And even with the cover up, because there was so much damage to the tissue, he said on this arm, you still see the indenture here. So it's not as if, boom, okay, you know,
done.
Nothing to be said, they're gone. But it really does come down to what I choose to do with it going forward. My legs still have scars, thighs, whatever, but I think in the great big context of things, the stigma that I felt against being someone who was scarred up has changed and transitioned over the time to, like you said, someone who feels empowered by it, someone who knows that the story can be helpful to somebody else, whatever, whether it was the self-harm, the drug use, whatever it might be. You know, here, dude, it's been a part of my life, and like, thank God for the life that I have today, you know? I'd still be in the stigma and shame if they were open and active and I was continuing to participate in it.
For sure.
You know, and it's so funny for me to, the word I'm going to use, but my therapist is like, but you are, you know, to say I'm a survivor of it. I feel like, yeah, okay, but she's like, no, but Heidi, you are a survivor of self-harm. You are a survivor of abuse. You're a survivor of drug use. And I'm like, okay, but I guess that's
it's hard for you to identify with it.
I guess I am, you know?
I think you are. I would say you are.
Okay. All right.
And that's another thing that's, in a way, it's a label. Does the survivor label bug you for yourself or for others as well?
It's hard because I guess I don't see myself like that. I can logically understand where she's coming from, but to me, I attach like such feats of like bravery, which here I am diminishing my recovery experience. You know, I'm like, hey, you
know what?
survived from cancer. Like, you survived from this. And it's like, why am I diminishing the experiences that I've had that I truly have been a survivor of? Maybe I just need to be more compassionate with myself in that regard.
It's interesting because now that you're talking about it, I'm like, would I be a survivor? I don't see that, you know?
Girl, yes.
You see? It's so hard for us to see it for ourselves.
Right?
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. I go, okay, yeah, like I did that. And I came out on the other side, and she's like, but you are a survivor. And I'm like, why do we have to use the S word? You know, like, you're making it so big of a deal. Like, let's call it what it is. We're cool today, right? We're doing all right. We're doing all right. Yeah.
That's interesting. I've never thought about it, about the survivor word.
The stigma of survivor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because then, like, what did she survive? Like, whoa, was she in a wildfire? Like, we think of it as this, like, different, you know? We think of it of, like, cancer, natural disasters, and plane crashes.
Or an isolated incident as opposed to an ongoing, or some of them self-inflicted. Yeah. Right? Where are we going with this rabbit hole?
Right?
Yo.
Yeah, like survivor with self-inflicted. Wow. Because that almost sounds quote unquote crazy. Myself. Yeah.
I survived my mental health.
That's what it is.
I survived through my addiction. I mean, it's true. I did. I did these things. And how about this? I am continuing to. Maybe I don't like survivor because it seems like the event is over. But with the addiction aspect and the mental health aspect, absolutely. I have to have the maintenance.
Are we surviving?
We are currently surviving and thriving. Laisha, you know, right? Hey. But seriously, because at any point there could be backslide and backfall to it. After I had my daughter, I spiraled into the worst part of my mental health and my recovery that I ever had with postpartum, right? It was the darkest time in what should have been the, I guess, most joyous time. Oh, here we'll talk about another stigma that's not talked about or brought to light, I think, enough, is women in postpartum after having kids. The anxiety, the depression, the darkness, like the panic attacks that I had, the intrusive thoughts that I had, it was so impacting to me in my day-to-day life. It got to a point for a little while there where I couldn't walk outside the house. I was not taking care of myself, and I had to call for some outside help to really start to bring me out of that. And it took a lot of work with it, but I didn't feel like I was a survivor of my mental health at that point. It slid back, and it really, really needed outside help outside of what was going on with me. Okay, so ladies, if you're out there watching and you're pregnant and you're expecting this amazing thing to happen, it is, and it will happen. But I also want people to be aware that postpartum is a very real thing. It happens to more women, that's talked about, and it comes more in the form of anxiety than it actually does depression. So postpartum anxiety is more the symptom that occurs with women than depression. And so we hear about it, movies, TV shows, books, like, oh, the baby blues or the postpartum, but really it's not as often like this depressive state, but more we'll talk about the intrusive thoughts. Everyone, everywhere that I was out to harm me or my baby. I couldn't walk outside. I couldn't take her to the park. I'd see a dude jogging, and I'm like, why the fuck is this dude jogging at 12 o'clock on a Tuesday? Like, what's his agenda out here? What are we doing? Okay, I got to go back home. I can't be out here with her, to the point where I couldn't leave the house, you know? And I want to normalize it because, like, through my pregnancy and first having my kid, nobody really talked to me about that or an expectation of what might happen. And I think it's because we don't want to put fear in women, But when it starts to happen, you wonder if you're fucking crazy. Like, you wonder if you're so fucking crazy, or if there's something wrong with you on why this is happening. But being pregnant and then giving birth is the greatest hormonal shift anyone will ever face in such a short span of time in a lifetime. Nobody ever goes through such a great hormonal change in such a short span of time. And so what goes with that too is all the executive functioning in your brain, whether it's highs and lows of depression, or like feelings of ecstasy, or this deep anxiety with it, or for me too, like I lost entirely sense of self for a period of time. Like I didn't know who the fuck I was, what I liked anymore, like what my role was in anything, like what was going on. Like the whirlwind of what happened was so overwhelming. And again, no warning. There's like, here's your kid, good luck. And I'm like, what is going on with me? Yeah.
People definitely don't talk about it enough. This is the first time I'm really hearing an in-depth experience of postpartum depression.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know like of like how many women struggle with it? Like is it like 1 in?
You know, I don't know, but I would also wonder if there would be accurate representation of it too, because a lot of women don't know to identify it as such, right? Mm-hmm. Or don't get help for it, so it can't be reported, right? A lot of women, and the degrees are varying as well too. I just know in the last few years since I've had my daughter, and I've had friends who have become pregnant and have kids, I very openly share my experience with it. Again, not to be like a harmful or like too much too fast of what I say, but as they are now raising their kids and they start to bring up things, there's a point of identification, and then there's a point of solution of the things that I did that did help work for me to get through it too. And again, that you're not alone in it, because as I was going through it, I thought, dude, I must be crazy, or I'm a fucking horrible mother, like because of these thoughts and these feelings and my inability to do certain things at a period of time. And then you get scared, like someone's going to think I'm crazy and take away my kid.
Yeah.
So I bring this up a lot too for women in recovery, because what happens a lot of time is a woman might be in recovery and then get pregnant and have a kid, and then the postpartum mental health comes in, and a lot of women relapse in that time too.
I feel like I've seen it before.
Yes. Yeah. And it's fucking heartbreaking, because I think if there was more awareness to it and support set up in place preventatively. Yeah, you go to your first doctor's visit after. They go, how are you doing? Okay, cool, rock and roll. But there's no like built-in setup and support for ongoing and preventative, maybe therapy, support services, community. Unless you have already a built-in community, there's not already one there. And so I think as I go forward with recovery and meeting women who become pregnant and then have their kids, like I try and really be this space a little bit more. Like maybe it's a little invasive, where they're like, hey, I don't really know you and I didn't ask, but I'm like, I'm here anyways, because this is an untapped need that I'm seeing. And God forbid it go as far again as a relapse, and then like everything that goes along with that, Yeah.
I am so glad you've brought that out here into the world.
I'm passionate about it because it was real fucked up, you know? I'm passionate about it because it was really shitty, and it was scary, and it was hard. And I just thought, because recovery taught me, we're going to keep circling back to this, Laisha, that if it's happened to me, it must have for somebody else. And so with that, I was able to start asking the questions, and thank God for recovery for teaching me to open my mouth about things at a certain point, And then with that, I found the tools and the supports that I needed, but not everyone is able to do that off the bat. Open their mouth or ask their questions or say the shameful thing like, dude, I can't stop this thought running through my mind of somebody hurting or harming my kid. And it's like violent and scary. And like, you can't stop your brain from running these ways.
You survived postpartum depression.
That I have survived. Yeah.
You can get down
I'm
with
here,
that one.
man. Yeah, I'll get down with that one. I'll take the S. You know?
With quote unquote surviving mental health, there's regression with it. Mental health, you're not just good and then you stay good. Even with mental illnesses, it's not linear.
Yeah.
We fall back. Like, yeah, maybe if you survive a natural disaster, it could be linear. Like, oh, I have a home. I'm building a home. I have a home now, and maybe I live somewhere safer where floods or hurricanes don't happen.
Yeah.
But with this, it's so different.
It's an ongoing thing. So maybe on the tombstone, label me as the okay, then I did survive the mental health, but I didn't survive just being a human, because ain't nobody get out of that alive, right?
Damn, that's crazy to think about. None of us survive.
None of us. We're doomed.
Well, you know what? I'm really glad you've trusted and had faith in a nurse on the street so that you were able to come on here and spread this message.
Yeah.
Of even just have a little bit of trust, have a little bit of hope. And now you're inspiring many people, and you're going to continue to.
Thank you, Laisha. And just thank you for doing this and for having the heart and the will to bring different people in here with their different experiences and to come at it with sincere curiosity, you know, and a sincere message to continue to put these things out there, because you never know who will hear, who will see, and who will connect, and who will find growth and inspiration. And, you know, okay, we might not all survive being a human, because at the end of the day, we don't. But what counts in that time is, what do we do and who do we impact, and like, what can we do with these shared experiences? We are all a collective here. And so the more we can lean in on being able to relate and to be able to utilize for the greater good, I think that's the purpose, man. So thank you. Thank you for doing this.
Of course.
Yeah.
I'm trying my best.
You're doing great.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much, Heidi, for coming on the podcast.
Yeah.
Spitting some fire, some knowledge, some experience. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
That was good.